business, one of the most amazing humans that I have ever met is Stacey Evans.
Oh my. Yes. That's not written in my bio.
No, that's me. That's me. That's straight from the heart. Stacey is a writer, and that is why, instead of moving through the streets like Beyonce and her baseball bat, she uses pen and paper. Each word a chisel, a chainsaw, a bludgeon. There's a lot that needs dismantling, a lot that will have to be razed to the ground before her words can focus solely on creation, on construction. It's not all blasting caps and wrecking balls, however. She has just embarked on her second fantasy pilgrimage during quarantine. Fresh off a virtual 400-mile Camino de Santiago, she's now a few stages into a virtual Via Franciniana? Can you tell me how?
Francigena? Francigena.
Francigena.
I just learned how to pronounce it this afternoon.
Beautiful. Which, although I cannot say it appropriately, is a 1,000-mile trek from Canterbury to Rome. All of this religious contemplation and imaginary trekking have to be good for both the breakdown and the new build. Tonight, resting in the Champagne Valley, she's happy to be hosting How to Build a Fire with yours truly and sharing this space with all of you. So, Stacey Evans, an amazing human.
These trees are. My virtual background is a picture from Les Faux in France, which is where we're paused on this virtual trek right now.
Gorgeous. So a little bit about how this time will be structured. So we have 4 beautiful storytellers. Can we get a wave from our storytellers? Yay! Miguel, Olivera, Tutu, and Substantia are all going to be telling stories. We will have two of our stories and then a short break for getting another drink or going to the bathroom. Whatever you got to do. You're a human. You do it. And then we'll come back for the second half and have our second 2 storytellers. A few practical Zoom things. Again, if you have lots of background noise, just mute yourself. If we notice that there's lots of background noise coming from your little account, we'll just mute you. Please don't be offended. It's just because of the noise behind. If you're giggling, if you're like crying, if you're having a feeling, that's great noise. We love that.
So you don't have to just mute yourselves automatically. Like you can stay, like keep your sound in the room unless suddenly there's, booming fireworks and craziness happening behind you. Because we like to hear what's happening with you too.
Mm-hmm. It's great if you can have your video up so that the storytellers feel like there's folks in the room. If not, that's also fine. And we want to give them love. We want to give our beautiful storytellers love. Clapping doesn't translate super well, so like waving your hands, doing some beautiful beautiful hand clapping or like snaps. There's also
react clap. Is also good.
Yep. Down at the reactions on the bottom of the screen, you can clap or thumbs up if you like. They're all pretty cool ways to give our beautiful storytellers some love. So that's how things are going to go. If you have any questions, you can always use the chat. Stacey, would you like to talk to us about dismantling, our theme for the month?
So our theme for this month, I just need to point out that Christina and I chose our themes ages ago.
Like over 6 months ago?
There was a pandemic, but every single thing that we've chosen has fit perfectly with quarantine.
We should also mention that we're psychic witches, so...
I'm suspicious.
I assume that goes without saying.
I told you about my special superpower, right? That's fine.
So our theme for this month. The events of 2020 so far have driven us into our homes like never before and into the streets in a way unseen by generations. We wake and sleep to calls for defunding the criminal legal system, vigils held for those passed into the next world from the ravages of disease, systemic racism, and at times a combination of the two. 2020, most of all, shows us that what was normal will no longer be normal, and it is up to us how to put together the Lego blocks of our society to create whatever is going to be next. When did you last take something apart? Was it literally a motorbike, a home, the bed your baby grew up in? What does it mean to deconstruct? Does dismantling always mean tearing down, always mean destruction? If we dismantle our social systems in the face of health and human rights crises, is that destruction or creation? Does everyone fit in whatever new systems are created? Who decides? How do we remake ourselves in ways that enrich us all, in ways that acknowledge the value of each of us, in ways that embrace our interconnectedness and the deep need to work together if we hope to survive? So everyone, welcome to How to Build a Fire, Dismantle.
Yes!
Yay!
Yes!
Oh, sorry, I'm clapping the wrong way. I do jazz hands.
Jazz hands clapping's great.
So
all right,
we are going to start, and I am going to introduce our first storyteller. Hold on, let me just grab his bio.
Can we get a big wave from Miguel?
Yay,
Hi.
Miguel.
Hi, Miguel.
So Miguel Angeles is our first storyteller. Miguel is a fat, queer Chicanx writer from Lindsay, California. After almost 15 years in New York City, he has returned to the rural interiors of California. His short story, Cicatrices, was published in 2010 in the Best of Panic anthology, and Este Dulce Frio was published in 2011 in From Macho to Mariposa, New Gay Latino Fiction. In 2012, his poetry was published in Nahuatl Undoing Dos, an anthology of poetry in Nahuatl, Espanol, and English. He has participated in Voices of Our Nation's arts, fiction, and political content workshops with Juno Diaz and Elmaz Abenader, and Cavicanum poetry workshops facilitated by Eduardo Corral, Rio Cortez, and Courtney Lamar Charleston. Everyone, please welcome Miguel.
Yay, Miguel.
I can hear you shouting myself out. Yes, so my name is Miguel Angeles. I was telling Stacy earlier that because my name is Angeles, like I always am like the first one to go. And I was like, I'm gonna start with a train wreck. So okay. We'll see how this goes. I think that so I know so Stacy had approached months ago to be here. I don't remember. I think maybe in December, and it just didn't work out. For some reason, though, when she mentioned the theme of Dismantle, it just all seemed to click. And I think I knew then that that there was something totally ready for, that I was ready to tell this. So I think that for me, Dismantle has kind of been a way of life. I think that's true for a lot of especially Black people and people of color. I think that we don't really acknowledge the ways in which the trauma that that our ancestors have experienced really lives in us and really affects us. And I think that because of that, we get filtered into these cycles of dismantle. I wanted to share with y'all, there's an Aztec myth that for those people that know me, I repeat this myth all the time because I feel like as soon as I heard it, for some reason, it just made total sense for me. And it just totally was exactly what, there was an attachment there, and there was like an ancestral knowing, I think there. It's the myth of Coyolxauhqui. So the myth goes that in ancient times, there was a goddess named Coatlicue. Coatlicue was on the Mount of Coatepec, and she was sweeping one of the temples, one of the main temples there. And as she was there, a couple of the feathers that were on the broom fell off. They somehow made their way into her, their way into her womb. And so, unbeknownst to her, she ended up being, conceiving basically this god Huitzilopochtli. And Huitzilopochtli was the god of war. And so there was a goddess, her daughter named Coyolxauhqui, who as soon as she learned that Huitzilopochtli had been conceived and was in her mother's womb, was really upset with the idea that war could be coming to Earth. So she decided that she was going to kill her mother Coatlicue in order to keep war from coming and reigning basically on the Earth. As she went to do that, she enlisted the assistance of her siblings, the 400 Stars of the South, and brought them to Coatlicue. And just as she was about to strike, Huitzilopochtli, who was the god of war, came out of his mother's womb, like full battle regalia, ready to like kill everyone, and decapitated Coyolxauhqui. He then went and like he dismembered her, like her limbs, tore everything apart, tore apart all of the 400 Stars of the South. The myth was that that Coatlicue was really upset that her daughter had been killed. And so Huitzilopochtli felt some kind of either shame or some kind of felt that Coyolxauhqui needed to be honored. So he decided that he was going to take her head and place her head in the sky, and she became the moon. That was a myth that was used by the Aztecs. Also, whenever they attacked a rival tribe, they would take someone and they would take them up to the temple steps and they would behead them, and they would let their body fall down the temple steps. So that was a myth that for some reason for me just really stuck with me. I learned it through Chicana lesbian feminists. Disclaimer, when I was growing up, I was super religious, and I was super, my family was non-Catholic, but I was raised pseudo-Protestant. So I didn't actually go to church, but we're all Jesus. Everything was 100% Jesus. And so I grew up with that type of mentality. And so being a queer, like brown kid, like I attached myself to that more than to like my queerness. And so there was definitely like, I don't know, internal homophobia that was going on there. And so I think that when I went to college, I continued with this idea of being like super religious and super Christian and all this. I was part of Campus Crusade for Christ, which is super like legalistic. They're not like the fun kind of Christians that like speak tongues or like interpret dreams or anything like that. They're super like boring Christians and everything by the Bible. I didn't learn the fun Christianity, which if I learned the fun Christianity, there would have been something to hold on to. So I was being involved with Campus Crusade for Christ, as I was asked to be on leadership, decided that I couldn't be on leadership if I hadn't dealt with my sexuality. So having not dealt with my sexuality, I decided, no, I can't do this, but let me try to figure out how to not be gay. So I went on, I joined like groups and all this stuff, but eventually things didn't make sense. Like there was no way that I was not going to be gay because I just was. And so I don't know when I realized that, but at some point I did. And at that point, this was after I had told my family, and my family is super religious and super conservative. And so I kind of knew that if I stayed near them, that I would hurt myself. And so I decided that I was going to go as far away as possible. And that happened to be New York City. And there was a weird type of knowing that was just kind of like, you're going to be in New York. Like, I don't know how. Like, I don't know why. Something that you're going to be in New York next year, and that's just how it's going to go. And so I applied to grad school, and I got in. And then I got to New York. Everything was fine until my family had like intervention, and we're like, you can't be gay because your family will hate you. So that like dropped me into a huge depression, and I just didn't figure out a way how to get out of it. I tried to go back to school, and it didn't happen. I just couldn't figure out how to disassociate things. So I remained in New York, and things like, so one of the things I think also like in my head, I think I was talking to my friend Char today, where we were like texting via Google Hangouts or something, and she was like, dude, you're a fucking Leo. Of course you have expectations for everything. Because side note, like, so I am about to lose my job. So my last day of work is on Tuesday, but I don't know why I didn't expect to be as emotional as I am and to feel like, I guess, I don't know why I didn't expect like silence to affect me the way it has. Like, I don't know why I expect anything from these white people, these white supervisors. I don't know why I expect them to like acknowledge my labor, to acknowledge the fact that like their 6-figure income is like based upon the work that I do and that like Black and brown people do. And so I don't know why like I expected them to be like, oh, Miguel's leaving. and you know, but, so anyway, that's kind of like thrown me for a loop. And she was like, basically, you're a fucking Leo. Of course you have expectations for everyone, for everything. Because I'm the center of the universe. But,
hell yeah.
so
That's
anyway,
the universe I want to live in.
no, right. Me too. But so in any event, side note, back to being in New York. So I think that just being in New York, I think one of the things that I expected when I moved to New York was that like all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm gay and like I'm gonna be accepted and everybody's gonna love me. But like, I guess that works if you're not fat and you're not like brown or like whitino, or as long, you know, if you're white gay, maybe that works a little easier. But you know, I remember when Eduardo Corral came out with he did an interview with someone and talked about how toxic the queer poetry scene is in New York. And I was just like, oh God, this dude is fucking amazing. Like, I love, and for those of you who do not know Eduardo Corral, like y'all are, sorry, but y'all are missing out. I don't know what is wrong with aside from the fact that white supremacy is like dug deep into you. But he has a new book coming out in August. So please, Guillotine, please buy it. He's an amazing fucking poet. He also wrote Slow Lightning. So yeah, but anyway, like I read that article and I was like, oh my God, he's fucking amazing. Like, yes, this makes sense. So I think that helped me to come to terms with that. The rest of my time in New York though, I think, so all that to say that for me, the whole gay thing didn't really work out. Like to date, I probably have maybe like 3 or 4 gay male friends. But most of my friends are like the tribe and the family that I have made have been like queer women, like Black and brown queer women that have really been there for me and have really like stepped up and been like all that like I've needed them to be. And so I really appreciate them for it. And so going back to like being in New York, I eventually was able to like get my things together and found a job. And yes, working there for 4 years, and then lo and behold, COVID hits. All of a sudden there's no funding, there's nothing available. But it's like whatever. Aside from that, I will say that I have been wanting to move back to California for a really long time. There's been something about like, even when I came to California in 2012 for Vona, there was something about just being here that just felt right and felt like home. And I think that that is coming back to like this idea of like ancestral knowledge and ancestral knowing. I think that there's a part of me that knows, and there's a part of every one of us that knows where we need to be and knows where things are and what makes sense for us. Coming back to this idea of dismantle, like basically as soon as I found out that I was losing my job, like I had an idea and I talked to my boss, and my boss was like, hey, like, don't worry about it. And then 2 weeks was like, well, we found out, she didn't say when, but that we weren't going to get funding probably. So yeah. And I was like, you could have told me that like 3 weeks ago when I told you I was worried about this. In any event, I packed all my shit and I left that day. As soon as I had that conversation, I was like, there's no need for me to go to New York anymore. There's no need for me to be dealing with like my mental health on my own, and like to not have any kind of support, to be so far away from all of my family in California. And so I think that this idea of dismantle has just been repeating in my mind and repeating in my head. I think especially now with everything that's happening with COVID, with the fact that it has hit the Black and Brown community so hard, I think that it's definitely not an accident. Like, we know that this shit has been happening for years, and the fact that white people have not been listening to Black people, y'all are idiots. Y'all are fucking, there's no other way to go about it. White supremacy is not just about like what you can see. There's so many things that are invested in it. And so coming back to this idea of Koyol Shauki, I think that when I first heard that tale, I always assumed that like I was Koyol Shauki for some reason. I think there's like other things there, or not that I was Koyol Shauki, but that I could relate to it. Like, obviously I'm not a woman. Like, I don't know how I feel about like other things. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like, I don't know if I'm like trans or whatever, but anyway, I know that I'm not a woman. I know that I'm not gender non-conforming or whatever. So that's probably it. But I also, like I said, like I think that there's a part of me that has been realizing that it's not about that. Like, she wasn't the only one who got tore up. Yes, Koyol Shauki was the one who went. She was the one who led everything, but she wasn't the only one that got tore up. Like, she had the Senson Wheatsnouting, the 400 Stars of the South, and they were there backing her up too, right? And I think that one of the things that I'm learning right now is that it is really important for me, like as a non-Black person, to like come forward for like Black people and just like really do whatever the fuck I can, like, and not be an ally, because fuck, allies are all lies, yo. That is the one thing I have learned, is that allies are all lies. Like, if you're not gonna put your money where your mouth is, like, you're marching, because it's not enough. And so I think that for me, being like one of those 400 Stars of the South, being there and being ready to like step up and know this isn't your fight, but it is your fight. You know, like, you need to learn when to like come for the people that are more vulnerable, not even more, well, yes, more vulnerable, but you need to like be there for the people that are about their shit. And so I think that like that has really solidified me into this thing of, yes, like queer people were not like, you know, especially queer men, because I know there's a lot of misogyny and there's a lot of misogynoir that happens within the queer and gay male culture. But I think that not being the centerpiece, we don't always need to be the fucking centerpiece. Like, we can like back up and we could get tore apart too. And that's still that's still a role to play. And so I will leave it at that. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for joining me on this train wreck.
Beautiful. Train wreck my ass. It was gorgeous.
Hooray for fat queers. Yay!
Yay!
Yes.
Miguel, absolutely. There is so much in there that you just shared that is that resonant with how like how the conversation needs to be directed and like the things that I'm thinking and feeling right now. So beautiful.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just wanted to really highlight a couple of things that you said, like the idea of an ally being like a real mouthpiece for a lot of folks. And it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm an ally. It's like, hang on, wait, like let's step back and see who gets to name who's an ally. You don't call yourself an ally. Like you get that.
I will say that like I am not about cookies. Like I call myself a cookie monster. I'm not about handing out cookies anymore. I'm done. Like, no. And so yeah, no, I think
it's something that is earned, you know?
Right, exactly. And I much prefer the term accomplice. Because like
accomplice, yes. I love accomplice.
I love that.
Get your hands dirty. Get your hands dirty.
Accomplice. Abolitionist is really nice because that doesn't imply any like that's like this is the work that I do. That doesn't that's not like it's not like oh this is how I feel. It's like this is the fucking shit that I am doing right now. It's an active.
Give up your money, please. Give up your money. Give up your money.
And I just love. Mwah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And I loved that you framed that with this story from your history, from Aztec history, and that hearing that story for the first time really resonated for you, and that made me think of when I first learned the stories of the Orishas and how that resonated for me, and realizing, oh, I'm connecting to this because this is part of where I'm from. And it sounds real to me because it's real. And so I really loved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we all have like a show of some like jazz hand claps from Miguel? Because that was a beautiful. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Yes.
Yay.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm so glad you waited for Dismantle. You would have been great for whatever that other thing was, but you were obviously meant to come for Dismantle, clearly.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's continue taking it all apart. Let's move on straight into our next storyteller, Olivera. Give us a wave, Olivera. Hi. Mwah, mwah. Olivera is really amazing. She stepped straight in yesterday.
Olivera, we forgot to say something at the beginning. We're recording this. This is being filmed.
I wasn't here. That's what happened.
Yeah, you weren't here, Terrence. This is your fault.
I'm out for you both.
Yep. We're going to pin this on you.
If there is someone who does not want to, like when the storytellers are telling their story, the camera is only showing them. We're doing spotlight view. But if there's someone who is in the audience who is really uncomfortable with being on camera, then please go off camera. And during these times when we're talking between stories. But otherwise, you will be included in the gallery view in the video when it goes up on the open source page. So.
Just the place where the recording lives, again, is the open source gallery page. It's the live stream. So you can, if you're interested, you can also look back into the archives of the How to Build a Fire event and the many other amazing events that open source presents. Yeah, so that's where it lives. We're not going to do anything sinister with it, but the internet is a terrible and wonderful place.
Absolutely.
So,
okay.
Please introduce Olivera.
Olivera Jokic is a writer and artist who has lived in New York City since 2008. She spends a lot of time thinking about what it means to live here and is currently enjoying the unlikely results of the pandemic, such as new kinds of friendships, more frequent phone conversations with old friends, and dance parties in Prospect Park. I'm ready for that. Olivera, thank you for stepping in at the very last minute. You're a very beautiful and brave human. Mwah.
And you're muted. Please unmute. Sorry.
Hi. Can we have one more clap for Olivera? Yay! Welcome!
I've never done this thing before, which is that the spotlight means I'm only looking at myself and I can't see anybody else.
Oh, you can
switch
change that.
it off. If you go up to the top right of your screen, click on gallery view.
Okay. Oh, that's
and then you can look at all of us.
okay. That's okay.
We're very beautiful. Don't worry. It's great.
Like I was talking to myself, which I don't need to do any more of. Then So thank you for inviting me, and lovely to meet everyone. And I was totally serious about the dance party in Prospect Park. I think it's the best thing going on in Brooklyn. If you are nearby, I think somebody said that they live, maybe Victoria said, that Flatbush was the location. If you go behind the boathouse in Prospect Park, there's a live band there every single night, and people dance until 10 p.m. So if you're anywhere near here, you should totally come by.
Oh man, I will see you there in 2 months.
They keep promising they'll be there until the first snow. So you see, since there's nowhere else to go in Brooklyn, everybody comes to the park, and there's like an ongoing party scene. So what I was thinking about when I was told about the theme was I actually had a lot of trouble landing on anything very specific or limited, partly because I come from the worlds in which you just keep sort of going on and on and on and on. And I wanted to think about what that means, and in a way, part of why we keep going on tangents, me and my people, has to do with how many things fell apart. That a lot of the experiences that I think about have to do with a variety of things that were supposed to happen, never happened, or things that most people take for granted just kind of disappeared. So what I wanted to talk about was this one interesting instance in which my mother was visiting me, and we had this sort of interesting, unusual conversation. And my mother has been to the US several times, and this whole mother-daughter story is sort of in the larger box of a story in which I am an immigrant. And I've lived in New York since 2008, but I've lived in the United States since '97. And I moved here from a country that doesn't exist anymore. It was called Yugoslavia. And I came here sort of during the war years. There was a civil war, the country fell apart. So my parents now live in what is currently called Serbia. It might fall apart further, so we'll see what it's gonna be called some years from now. But my mother was born in what was then Yugoslavia, but is now Montenegro, which is a tiny little country on the Adriatic Sea. My father is from Serbia, and they come from two different communities. They met sort of by accident because they grew up in the same small town in which they currently are spending their summer because it's a better place to have a pandemic when you have a yard. So my mother was coming to see me about every other year. And she would usually come with my sister. And so this one time, which would be 5 years ago, my mother came, and my sister came, and this was the second time they came to New York. They would come to the other places where I used to live in the US. And this was not the first time in New York, but it was the first time that they came with my sister's kid. And I sort of knew that my mother, who's now in her 70s, she gets tired of New York very easily. New York is too big, too loud, too crowded, too far. Everything's very complicated. So we would drag her one day all over Manhattan, and then she would take 2 days off to sort of recover. And so they usually come and stay for a couple of weeks. And there's this one time that my sister and I kept sort of making plans. What are we going to do this day? And we were sort of thinking like, is there a museum we wanted to go to? Is there a store we wanted to go to? Is there a park we wanted to go to? We needed to see the near public library, blah, blah, blah. And so at some point, my mother's kind of not imposing because she wants us to do what we want to do. And she will adapt to whatever decisions we make. That's sort of the deal. So at some point, my mother says, oh, okay, so you think you want to go to Manhattan? And we're kind of saying yes. And my mother says, I don't think we can go to Manhattan today because the baby doesn't like the subway. And we were kind of like, the baby doesn't like the subway? Baby at this point is 18 months old. And for some reason, my sister and I completely missed out on this moment when the information was shared with my mother that the baby likes the subway. And of course, it is my mother who strongly dislikes the subway, hates getting on it, staying on it for hours, hates that it's dirty, hates that it's dark. Everything about it is not her thing. But I was kind of taken aback for a few minutes, kind of like, what would you mean the baby doesn't like the subway and what does that mean? But then I realized that my mother was trying to tell us that, of course, she doesn't want to go to Manhattan. And that by saying that the baby doesn't like the subway, she is signaling to us that we should sort of observe what the baby likes and do what the baby likes, because what we want to do is particularly unimportant. So I kind of thought about that for days and days and days about why my mother wouldn't say for herself, I don't want to go to Manhattan, I hate the subway, but she would sort of make the baby speak for her. And so after some thinking about it, I realized that it has several explanations. One of them is that I know my mother to be a woman of a certain generation in which even women who, like her, had jobs, had education, had careers, still sort of thought of children as the kind of people who sort of determine a woman's life, that her life was sort of siphoned off into her children's lives, even though her children had completely different lives. And I fundamentally, by emigrating, I had dismantled my own life and I have dismantled hers. She wasn't planning on her children living across the world. She didn't know what to do with this. And so she had to sort of reconfigure her own existence around this. And it's been pretty nice because she never expected to go visit in the US. She never expected to visit New York. She never expected to have a child who lives who knows where. But it's also, if I said I'm going to live in the treetop, she would come and visit and stay with me in the treetop. So that's a good part. The interesting part to me was that the whole business of sort of having children speak for you, especially babies who really don't speak for themselves, also had to do with this country that she was from, that shaped her, and that shaped sort of who she could be as a woman and what she could say for herself. And it was a country that was sort of deeply invested in the future, that the youth was very important, that the sort of brighter future, the brighter days to come were the organizing principle of everybody's life, and that she took those things very, very seriously. That's kind of how my life and my sister's life were put together, that because of the way that country used to be, my grandmothers were practically illiterate, and my sister and I have a very extreme excess of education. So something about that place was such that because it believed in the future, it was obsessed with children. And it trained all these women whose lives were dramatically changed by free education, abundance of jobs, various possibilities of travel. It sort of turned them into the kinds of creatures who are both very traditionalist and sound like they only know how to have kids, but also treat children as some sort of source of wisdom, which everybody else should respect. And so if a baby says, I don't like the subway, that must be some universal truth that everybody else should respect. My sister and I were sort of taken aback because our lives were very much those lives of kids who were treated like royalty, but that's why we are not particularly interested in the kinds of lives of women who only had babies. I'm sort of going to end there, that I have sort of learned how to dismantle the life, but also to dismantle the language in which those lives were described, and that by dismantling my life and my mother's life, we have arrived at some sort of new kind of conversation about what it means to live in New York, how one has a dance party, what it means to be in a pandemic, what's applicable all over the world, what can be understood if you're on your own in a new place, if you're an immigrant, if you speak in a foreign language. So that's about it.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Olivera, thank you. That's gorgeous. I have absolutely had those moments myself with the not just the women in my family, but like people who for some reason feel invalidated to share their true desires and their needs as well, and their wants for like, I want to hang out with you, I don't want to go to fucking Manhattan, like but to find some different language to express that. And it's a really like beautiful dramaturgical, which is why I think I resonate with that so much, assessment of like, hang on, why are you doing this? What are the symbols that you're using to elevate this moment? Like, what is the actual language that you're using beyond the words to express to me what's going on? Because it's not about the words. Like, you're using all of the semiotics of the world that you come from, and sometimes they don't fit with mine.
Yeah.
Very amazing.
I wanted to say, like, the baby doesn't like knife fights, and the baby doesn't like gambling.
It's
The baby likes the gambling.
It's not like
yeah, no, the baby likes the whiskey and the gambling, but doesn't like the subway. It's a little bit like Think of the Children, which is never ever about the children. Like, thanks,
No.
Karen.
Never.
Thank you, Karen. We've got it. Think of the children. Why don't you just tell us how you feel? But thank you for sharing that. Like, the intergenerational conversation is always difficult, especially when there's intercontinental conversation going on at the same time.
Yeah. And I have to say, Olivera, I mean, it's a very long time since there was a Yugoslavia. And even though I live in the modern world, I only ever say Yugoslavia because I went there while it was still Yugoslavia. So in my head, it's still Yugoslavia. And I say, oh, I went to Yugoslavia. And the people are like, what? You have to say, like, what country you went to. I'm like, but I don't know. Because I went when it was one.
I'm going to authorize you to say Yugoslavia all the time.
I do the same thing with Czechoslovakia. I know I live in the modern world, but my brain still exists in that memory space. So.
I feel like...
No, sorry.
No, please go.
Oh, I was just going to say, in my personal sense of how history worked out, Czechoslovakia is a slightly different example because Yugoslavia fell apart in a war, and so
Yes.
successor states turned into shitholes, more or less. So one of the things that people of my generation especially much prefer is to say that they're from Yugoslavia because it's not an embarrassing country. So all of the ones are very embarrassing.
Also, if you went to Yugoslavia, you didn't go to Serbia or Montenegro, or like you went to Yugoslavia in that time. And that's, I mean,
Exactly.
that's a historical reference in itself, but just because it doesn't exist anymore doesn't mean that you didn't go there. That's like
Yeah.
saying I never dated those people because they're not in my life anymore. Like, I fucking dated those
I
people.
totally say that. That part is true.
You are.
But I did go to Yugoslavia.
Hey, on this beautiful note, I'm looking at all your gorgeous faces and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm out of cider. So I think it's time to have like a 5-minute break,
Yes.
go and get
So
a drink.
before we go for a break, because I don't know if she's going to stay, I just want to say my sister is here also. Candace.
Stacy's
New
sister.
hose. We have a new hose.
Hang on, Candace, Grace, who are you?
Oh, and I think I might know who Grace is too, but I can't be sure because
Candace?
she's just.
Your sister is Candace?
Yes, my sister is Candace.
Hi, Candace.
Hi, Candace.
I'm so glad you're here.
In
Stacy's
this
family
moment,
is...
she is so happy that she is not on camera. I just want to say.
We adore your Stacy.
Cursing my
Adore
name, but
her.
you can't see
Yeah.
her, so it's okay.
All right.
Hi, Candace.
And I
all
want to
right.
say hi, Jazz. I didn't see that you were there before. It's very nice to see you.
Hi,
So-
I came in slightly late. It's great to see everybody. It's great
I
to see
recognize
to see you.
I recognize those books behind you.
so many good books.
Jazz is currently in subletting my apartment in Brooklyn while I am in Washington State.
There.
So
He rescued me. I was in the worst place, and now I'm in the best place.
Oh, nice.
it's not the worst. It's definitely getting closer to the best. As with each apartment that I get, the next one is closer to the best.
That just
And I'm
means
glad
you're
to
becoming
share it.
more of a New Yorker.
True.
That's right.
That's part of it.
Is it also more of an adult? I think I can say that. I'm gonna go out on a limb.
I don't know. You're drinking cider.
Yeah,
Hey,
because I can't drink beer anymore because it upsets my tummy. All right,
Understood.
go get a drink. Go
Yes,
to the
we're gonna take a
bathroom.
break.
We'll
Not
be
a super
back.
long time. It'll be like 5
Yeah.
minutes.
We'll
Okay.
be back at 6:10. All right, 6:10 on the dot with
Is
Tutu and
9:10
some Fanta.
for the rest of
You
us.
mean
So
9:10.
what time are you looking at?
9:10.
It's
9:10
6 on the
for the rest
West
of the
Coast. Miguel, you're with me, right?
9:10.
It's 6.
Okay.
No.
Now you can just look at my
I'm still
avatar.
showing you. I don't know what y'all are
I'll be
talking about.
right
I'm still in sunlight, right? I might look
Wow.
like I have a wonderful background here with like very moody lighting, but it's just the sunlight.
I'm still in 170-degree weather, so it's all good.
I actually am staying somewhere with a little swimming pool.
No.
And there's so many trees, and I get to like just go walk around in the woods on my own, and I have a swimming pool here as well, which is crazy.
Cool.
Don't worry, I'm just quarantining here. I don't live here.
Ooh.
I'm not that grown up. All right,
Yeah.
it's time for me to go and get a cider.
I appreciate about being in California is I can walk outside of my house without
Yes.
fear I'm going to get coronavirus.
Yeah. All right, folks. I'll see you back at 9:10 or 6:10, whichever side of the world you're on. Mwah. Olivera, you're beautiful, and that was wonderful. Thank you so much for stepping in.
Thank you.
Huge. Mwah, 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 mwah.
Perfect. Perfect.
Stacy, do you
I have acquired a cider in solidarity with Christina. In fact, Christina gave me this cider, so it's truly in solidarity with Christina.
Casey, you missed this, didn't you? Here comes the car. Here comes.
The story was great. The last folks who shared it was really wonderful.
My mom does have it going on. It's true.
Different kind of going on, though. I think.
Or not necessarily.
Candace, I'm virtually sharing a cider with you. I have another one in my refrigerator. We'll consider it yours.
What is going on in Monica's world there?
I know. Well, this is something that's for the next thing that's happening in the gallery.
Whoa, Monica's wall's crazy.
Hands in the background.
I'm freaking out.
I know. It's actually pretty.
I love it.
Awesome. So that's not live, but it's a recording of when they did it live, and there were there's a dancer here and then one in Finland, but they overlap and they really interact. So it's pretty awesome. And
so that's going on a screen behind you?
Yes.
That is trippy.
Right? Everything that happens in the open source space is
you see the one,
that's why we like it.
You see the one that's a little bit clearer and the one that's not quite so clear. So the one that's not quite so clear is in Finland, and the one that's clear is here. But when the projection is really good, it's sometimes hard to tell.
Monica.
Who's there?
But Monica, you're not by yourself in the gallery. Who's with you?
No, that's Geza.
Oh, hi, Geza. But you're silhouetted, so I can't see you.
We're a little dark right now because we obviously, but it's interesting, I thought. And then,
you're in silhouette. It's like we're watching Mystery Science Theater.
Oh,
and then, actually, I'm going to show you something else, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you something else, too.
You're going to walk down to Freddy's and show us the sexy naked frog?
She's going to show us the frog in just a moment. Wait, who's that?
And then, I don't know if you can see it, but maybe we can find and hear some crickets. Do you see some crickets?
Yay!
Why do you have crickets? Why? Just
wow.
Do I have 30 seconds?
Yes.
I had to wrestle with an ice tray that was like all of these ice cubes that were in the shape of Will Ferrell from the movie Elf. And so I didn't get to pee in that time. So I'll be back in just like 30 seconds. It'll be powerful and very, very fast.
You're mine.
Monica, why do you have crickets?
Oh, that's why.
I'm puzzled and distressed.
Oh, look at
I
that.
can hear them. But this is actually perfect because Terrence's name for some reason is Tarantula tonight. And my aunt used to have tarantulas. And when we used to take care of the tarantulas, we had to buy them crickets as their food. So we had to buy live crickets and put them there. So you're here to supply Terrence snacks tonight, Monica. It's very kind of you.
You're welcome.
That's actually usually what people think of when it's crickets, right? They think about food for their more like unorthodox. That's also not the right word. Like more exotic pets.
Yes.
I think of crickets as the sound I hear when my jokes don't go over.
Yeah.
Because I have no exotic pets. So.
You could also eat crickets, right? I feel like there's...
I have eaten a cricket taco before.
Chapulines.
I think my mom
Chapulines
has crickets. But she was in Mexico, maybe. But she's not going to...
Saying that eventually we're going to have cricket.
It's very hard to draw her into the conversation.
Monica's actually renting out the gallery as a comedy space, and she's hired the cricket just in case.
Yeah.
Bada boom.
Know that.
So will the crickets be mic'd? Is this what's happening?
Well, the crickets is telling a story tonight.
If I hear those crickets while I'm telling my story, I'm leaving. Actually, I can't leave because I'm not wearing pants, and y'all would see it. So.
Hang on, Substantia, did 911 ever turn up?
No, they never came, and I didn't undo anything, but it said, you know, you've called 911, and I hit, you know, get out, cancel. But I mean, I was already connected, I think.
Maybe they knew you were in good hands because the president was behind you.
No, now I know I'm on this, you know, do not serve list with the cops, which makes perfect sense.
I mean, that's kind of handy in
They've
all
heard
senses of the word because they're awful.
My social media posts, I guess. So
The cops
show up when a white woman called, so it's weird.
the cops turn up for Substantia when she doesn't want them. Like it's like a superpower.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And now we've come full circle. That was my last story at How to Build a Fire, was getting chased by the cops.
Are we all back in the room? Was I the last person?
The room where
And
it
the
happened.
fireworks are continuing, so it's obviously time for us to continue also.
Did you hear that from mine or from yours?
I have a cider now, Christina.
Huzzah!
It's one of the Shacksberries that you brought me.
Ooh, I have a,
Should we all cheers if you've got a beverage? If not, just like a thumbs up or a symbol of sorts. Cheers, folks. Welcome back. Yes. How about we roll right on into our third beautiful storyteller?
Yay! Yes.
All right. Also one of my favorite people in the whole world. Tutu, can you give us a big wave so we know who you are?
Hey.
Hi. You're so wonderful, and I'm so glad you're here. Tutu is a Ugandan born and raised who moved to New York City 6 years ago. She just passed the 5-year mark at which most people agree that you can begin to call oneself a New Yorker. I didn't know that was a metric. I love that. I've got a while to go, but I'm aiming. Tutu moved to pursue a master's degree at NYU with the intention of going back home, Kampala, or to Cape Town, where she lived for 4 years during her undergrad. Unlike most people who moved to New York, she didn't come with her suitcase filled with dreams. Instead, she came to get a qualification that would allow her to move on to something else. However, somewhere in the 3 years it took to complete her degree, she fell in love with the city and its people. In the end, when it should have been time for her to move on, she decided to stay and make this city her home. And I'm really glad you did, because you have made my Saturdays for the last couple of months like so much better. So much better. She graduated from NYU with a master's in clinical nutrition, but her time there left her emotionally scarred and hesitant to pursue a career in the clinical field. Halfway through her master's, she realized that what she really wanted was to be able to work with people and communities outside of the restrictions and limitations of hospital regulations. Working at Grow NYC allowed Tutu to transition into working inside and alongside the community. At Grow NYC, she is a part of a team that creates a learning environment in green markets where students K-12 can engage with locally grown food and its growers. Our fun, interactive green market school tours help children gain an understanding of farming in our region and how their food choices impact their bodies, their communities, and their environment. And just the most beautiful smile in the whole world, aside from the list of wonderful accolades you just heard. Tutu Badaru.
Yay.
Welcome.
Yay, Tutu.
Thanks. I also have to say, I didn't realize you would be reading it.
Oh.
So long.
It's
It's great.
so
We
full
just
of
learned so much about you. It's wonderful.
lush details and beautiful things, and still so much to learn.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Christina. It's been so fun getting to know you and just hanging out and being crazy at the market together. I really enjoyed that. So as Christina read, I'm from Uganda, and I moved here a couple of years ago thinking I would be here for a quick second and then go back. And so I guess my story starts on election day. I mean, I didn't know that my story started at this time, but it does. When I think back, it starts on election day in 2016. I don't know where all of you were, but I
remember.
You do. I was watching the results coming in, and halfway through the night, it was just too much to like deal with. And so I decided, I'll go to bed and then wake up, and hopefully we have a new female, like the first female president in America. But I guess we all woke up to the most terrible news. And I feel lucky to live in New York City because I felt like the day when we found out, it was a day of mourning, and it felt like the entire city was mourning and that the entire city was very sad. But I think when I heard the news, when I thought about the entire Trump campaign and how much hate and how much just like evil was coming out of it, in my head I was thinking, okay, worst case scenario, if he's elected as president, this is America, right? Like, their rules and their checks and balances, and even if they elect a president who's an idiot and he won't get away with a lot, right? Because I mean, this is America, it's 2017. So that was like kind of what was in my mind. So I was sad, but thinking, okay, this is a progressive country that has developed, and coming from a third world country, I think I had very high hopes for what would happen with a Trump administration. And so in January, when he like banned Muslims from coming back, even people who are American citizens who had green cards, when he enacted the America First policy that were very harmful to immigrants and to people who are not Americans, when he separated families from their children and put children in cages, and with the diversity visa being reduced, like with all of those things, dissolution of DACA, with all of those things, I felt like I protested those things. I was angry about those things. I was like, I empathized and I was upset, but because I think I didn't know anybody who was going through this stuff. I don't think I really felt what I don't feel like I truly empathize with people because it was one step away from me. And I think back in my mind, there's this thing that African parents always tell. Well, okay, I won't generalize, but a lot of African parents tell their kids that if you pay your taxes, if you obey the law, if you're like a model citizen, everything will be good. And I think that was like in the back of my mind this entire time when all this stuff was happening. I was like, this is fine. I'm safe. I can fight for people who aren't safe and figure out ways to make this more safe for them. And in 2017, I had just graduated from NYU, and so I was working. I basically was able to work because I had a student visa. And thank Obama in the back of Substantia's. I don't know if everyone's seen Obama's back there, but Substantia, make some noise so that it goes to the. So
that's my man.
Yeah, I was one of the people who benefited from an Obama policy that allowed people who are coming out of like tertiary institutions in the U.S. to be able to work. And so after my student visa was like, after I graduated, I had 3 years, also because I was studying a science subject. I had 3 years in which I could work here without having to, without needing my work to sponsor me. And that makes it a lot easier to get a job. It makes you less coming in as an immigrant. Most jobs aren't quick to hire people who need visa and they need to pay a lawyer. So that kind of level that playing a lot of immigrants who especially had studied here and were trying to find a way to fit into the country. And so I was like, okay, I'm safe. I'm probably going to be fine. And still in my head, I was like, this is America, right? There are checks and balances. Things work. Like things work. Even though it literally felt like a shitstorm all around, I'm like, no, but wait, it's America. Like things.
The word clusterfuck was literally invented for that moment.
Yeah.
Like, no, I've been in a country where I've like seen just how the government has broken down and how like nothing trickles down to the people below. I'm like, but you know what? I feel like my idea of America is maybe something that I kind of like took on from a lot of people around me growing up, because America was this like utopia and this like paradise that we all wanted to go to. And I had finally made it and I was there. And so I was like, okay, even though all this like stuff is happening, I'm still going to be fine. And so in 2019, the visa that I had was expiring. And so I needed to get into a different kind of visa. I needed to get into a work visa. And one of the most common ones is H-1B. You hear a lot about that in the news. That's one of the easiest ones to get. You don't have to like win a Nobel Peace Prize, or it is anyway. I will like complain about how hard it is as an immigrant to like validate your ability to stay in this country. Anyway, so I walked into the lawyer's office thinking, okay, this is a formality. I'm basically like the poster child for like a really great immigrant to want to keep in the country. I have a job. I was working for a nonprofit. I was doing good. I was not making a ton of money. Like, why wouldn't they want to keep me? So anyway, when I went in, I just had all these like I had this idea that it was going to be pretty easy, that this was just kind of like a formality, and I would be fine. I'd get my work visa and then just keep working. And but my lawyer basically like broke down the entire situation and explained how basically our president and Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon had been, what's his name? Something Bannon. Anyway, they had all been working to create a very hostile immigration system. It's probably one of the most hostile immigration systems that we have had in a really long time. And so basically everybody who she knew that was a really great candidate that she thought, not just on paper, but in real life, would be a good, like was like a yes. They were all getting either requests for more information, which is like, we haven't quite rejected you, we want information, and once you give us that information, maybe we'll say yes, maybe, but there's no guarantee. And so she had a lot of people who are coming back in, and she basically said, this is going to be a really hard journey. I want to prepare you. I don't want to give you like false hope. There's a very high probability that the answer, like you would not get a visa and you'd have to go back home, which is something I hadn't considered because I'd been working for 3 years and had like decided that this is going to be my home after thinking that it wasn't. And I'm like committed to this. And so for the entire month of May, I was just very depressed and very immobilized and couldn't do anything. It took me an entire month to finally like walk up to my boss and tell her like, okay, this is what's happening and this is what we need to do. And I'm very thankful for growing my C and for who I worked with. They stood up for me in ways that I never imagined that they would. My boss just like, she's one of those people that just like kicked into full gear. She was just like, all right, what do we need to do? She got our CEO to like sign stuff that he usually would have been like, wait a second, let me take a look at this. You know, she got a ton of people to write he got a ton of people to basically like vouch for me and vouch for the work that I was doing and vouch for our organization. And this entire time I was just immobilized by fear, because I don't know if anybody here knows what it feels like to have no control or power over any plans that you're making. You have no control over the place that you're calling your home. It's very unsafe and unsettling, and it's just an unnerving feeling that I don't know if I can adequately describe. And it just made me not want to do anything or not want to work hard. So it was very important for me to see my community come alongside, to see my coworkers, to see my friends, like help me with like figuring out the lawyer stuff, like figuring out how to get that paid. Many people gave tons of money. And so this was like, for me, I feel like my idea of America was like being dismantled, because that's what we're talking about. Like on a macro scale, it was this idea of America being a utopia, that one that like things worked well, like that evil wasn't allowed to kind of just like that the government worked. I think that in my mind, like that was being dismantled. And then on a micro scale, I was seeing my community come alongside of me in the way that I was expecting to be received by like America. And so there were all these like contrasting views, and somewhere in the middle of that, I don't know if you're watching, but in the news, there was a crowd of people at a Trump rally basically shouting about Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, who are legal citizens of this country. And they're shouting at them that they should go back where they came from. And there are just like all these things that were happening on a macro scale that were telling me, you're not enough. We don't want you here. You need to go. But then on a micro scale, just feeling the affirmation from my friends, from my coworkers who were saying, hey, we're here for you. We're going to stand here for you. Like, tell us what you need. Yeah. And then, so in September, I unfortunately we got a response back, and it was like, we need more information. Can you worth it? Come on.
Fuck.
So it's like, oh gosh. And the funny thing is that it costs you like you have to pay more, because you have to pay the lawyer for all this like more money. And it's like, isn't this just convenient that you could say no, but somehow money is going? And it was extremely frustrating. And for me, at that point, I had just been through so many things that I was like, I had made peace with going home. I had made peace with like, I have a home where people love me and care for me. And my family was saying, hey, come back home. Like, this is insane. This is crazy. This doesn't seem like it's worth fighting for. And at that moment, I was just like, I mean, I was like already paralyzed by fear, and I just gave up. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And gosh, my boss, again, she just like came in, swooped in, and she's like, you don't need to do anything. We will do this for you. And she's a very good example of what an accomplice looks like. Put herself right in front of this situation. She basically didn't care about all the different huddles that we were being presented with. My HR was so discouraging, and my boss just like brought her off and said, you can't say this, we're gonna try, and we won't give up until we hear no. And I was just sitting there thinking, I've already given up, this is too hard. And so I started putting into place all the things to like get ready to go home. I moved out. I was planning to move out. I found some friends who let me stay in their couch while I waited. I essentially thought I was waiting to hear no. I sold a bunch of stuff. I basically was like, all right, I'm done. And this was a good fight. Paid a bunch of money for nothing. But at least I was here for a while, and I have a good community. But also I think I was just at the point where like, if the worst thing that comes out of this is that I was able to realize what my community looks like and how much they love me and care for me just very specifically, I'm like, all right, great. I'm glad. Like I can, like this is a good takeaway for me. But deep down, I was like, I still want to stay though. I still want to stay. but I don't know. It looks pretty bleak. And so the day before I was moving out of my apartment, I was running a bunch of errands and I missed a call from my boss. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I want to, I don't know. She left a voicemail. So I was like, oh, it took me maybe 10 minutes to figure out, do I really want to listen to this? Do I want to listen to like bad news? I was like at DSW and like I'm going to start crying. People won't know why. I won't know how to explain this. I mean, I didn't need to explain. Anyway, but I was just like, I don't know, do I really want to listen to this? But I finally did. I was like, I can't like postpone this. And I actually still have the voicemail saved. She was like screaming on the phone and saying, Tutu, we got it. We like bought the big guys and we won. And it was
Nice.
Oh,
Wait, Tutu is frozen.
It's a beautiful smile that is frozen. Oh my God, Tutu, you look beautiful, but I want to see more of your face.
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh, hang on. I hear your voice now.
She's coming back.
Yeah, that's what this story is all about.
Can't keep Tutu down.
No.
Don't put Tutu in a corner.
All right. Let me.
No.
Oh, was that Tutu? Was that you? Let me see. Bow, bow.
Oh no, she went out, but she should be back in, I think, in a moment.
Hey, Stacy.
Hey, Tarantula.
You should stop shooting off fireworks while people are telling stories.
I'm sorry, what?
I said you should stop shooting.
Don't do it, Stacey. Shoot off all the fireworks you want.
Yeah, shoot off those fireworks, damn it.
Make your
Shoot 'em off.
presence known.
Yes, celebrate however you can.
I would like the fireworks to stop. They seem to happen right outside my window, which is
mine.
horrifying.
Everybody's window.
Isn't it just all of Brooklyn is a firework?
It's not just
And
Brooklyn,
Manhattan.
but
It's across the country, though. They're doing that shit over here in California, too.
Yeah,
like
they're
it's
doing it
all over the
everywhere.
at the
country.
same time.
Oh, man.
It started at the same time it started in New York, so it's not a coincidence.
No.
No, absolutely.
It's
And
like,
then our very fabulous mayor, my former boss, announces that the police are gonna go hard at this. And I was like, oh, because
what
that
the
won't end
fuck,
badly.
de
I was
Blasio?
like, what are you even saying? Like, just,
He's
hell.
out of control. He's got a special security
Tutu's
unit.
back! Yay!
That is not a word he should be using.
No, it's
right.
never a word you should be using.
Okay.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, God damn technology.
Damn technology, but I'm so glad that you're back. It was really lovely because you know when like a Zoom or a like a screenshot or something is taken and the face is like
Yeah, no, but
yours was like
It was perfection.
it was so beautiful. And so I was just like gazing into your eyes like
Thank you.
I love you. And then I realized that you weren't
I know,
moving.
I thought you were making a very dramatic pause, and I was like just waiting, and I was like, no, she's frozen.
Oh yeah,
That's
that's, I see now there's a problem. I don't want there to be, but that's fine.
I mean,
Okay.
just to end off, and basically, so that came through, and I remember my boss saying that you can take a breath now, and I realized for like 5 months I hadn't been exhaling. It felt like, okay, the weight has been lifted off of my shoulders, and she's like, it's fine, like now you can basically like move on with your life, you can feel safe. And I told her that I really can't. This is just 3 years. I only have 3 years until I have to do this again. And if something drastic doesn't happen, and if people don't come in like numbers to vote out our current president, people like me are just going to go through like years and years of just like feeling so helpless, and having no control whatsoever with places that we call home. So I always want to put a happy spin on this, but the truth is that I just find myself in the middle where I'm like, I'm happy, I can make plans. I'm so excited to be able to make plans and to keep them. I'm excited to like put down roots and live in a neighborhood I wanted to live in for such a long time. But I also, like, in the back of my mind know that all of this, like my ability to like make this place my home, is dependent on people who have no right to decide where and how I call home, and give me no opportunity to like fight for that. Yeah, so that's my story.
Tutu.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming back and rounding that off. It's so important to be rooted in in the understanding that the dichotomy of what you expect a system to be, the system that represents a country, like the America, checks and balances, this big overarching beautiful story that is so beautiful, and it just those systems are exactly what the conversation is happening around us right now. It's endemically corrupt. It is corrupt in a way that is justified by people who are making decisions and leveraging that power to make those corrupt decisions. It's a very kind of it's such a well-tied kind of corruption that I don't think it's expected. And the contradiction that you find in communities that you actually interact with, your corner store and your neighbor and your friend, but we slip into those systems so quickly, and it's very, very hard to fight against them internally and in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
I'm gonna cry. My green card is also up for review right now, so that's yeah. Anyway, I love you and thank you for sharing.
Wow. Sorry, I'm also just following what's in the chat. So Monica, I'm very happy that Miguel invited you, but you are welcome to come every time there's a How to Build a Fire. It's the last Friday of the month. It's not always on Zoom, but we are on Zoom right now, and who knows what we'll look like next month. We haven't figured that out yet. But I'm glad that we're on Zoom this month, because otherwise Miguel wouldn't be here to tell a story because he's in California. He couldn't have made it to the gallery.
No.
So I'm really happy that we've been able to transition to Zoom so that folks who can't usually be here get to be part of this.
I mean, unless you were going to pay for my ticket, Stacey.
Yes. I would if I could, Miguel. You know I would. So we have a final story. I'm going to introduce the amazingly talented Substantia Jones.
Don't oversell.
That's an undersell, if anything.
You know, she rolls deep. She comes with the president, which is very impressive. Photo activist Substantia Jones is a former radio producer, host, and since 2007 has been the creator of and sole photographer for the body politics campaign, the Adipositivity Project. She describes the project as equal parts feminism, fuck youism, and fat. Her photography has been featured internationally in books, magazines, and news outlets, and has been exhibited in galleries and museums across the globe. And her calendar is hanging in my other room and graces my home with its beautiful photographs. And everyone, please welcome Substantia Jones.
Thank you. Just as the fireworks are beginning outside.
I know, right?
Great timing. Oh my God, there I am.
There you are, but you can go back to gallery view if you want to.
I'm not going to pretend I don't like looking at myself, Stacey.
I really like looking at you.
In that shade of lipstick, I want to look at you all day.
Thank you. Bright bitch red.
Oh, fuck yes.
I am not at all comfortable telling you this story. I've been second guessing myself all day. But everything else related to Dismantle was either too personal or too soon. And maybe my story will cause someone to think differently about money. That would be great. Then I heard Miguel's story, and it made me glad I selected this topic. It's fortuitous. So here goes. This story spans 60 years. So get comfortable. You can give me the hook when you need to. And no matter how sad it seems in places, trust that it's a happy story. I promise you it's a happy story. Except for the part about this junior prom dress. That is genuinely sad. But everything else I can now laugh at. I hope you can laugh at some of it too, but there's a reason I'm telling you all this really personal stuff. You'll see, it's happy. I've done a lot of personal dismantling in recent months, dismantling vanity, dismantling my history of heterosexuality, dismantling the notion of perhaps living to a ripe old age. A lot of shit going on with me lately, not to mention gobs going on throughout the country and on an international level, our very way of life being dismantled. One hopes to make room for a better one, something far better. But there's a dismantling which feels a bit more tangible and even more profound to me. And it begins, it's happier than the other dismantlings in my life, but it begins with a death or a birth, actually, or I should say with a childhood, a child born not into poverty, but thrust into it the day when in second grade, when the school bus driver pulled over to my stop one afternoon, peered down the block and asked me if I was moving. And I looked down the block in the direction of the house paid for by my dad's job at the shipyard, the house that I had lived in all my life. And I saw my older brother and older sister loading boxes into the car, and my mom putting a lamp in the trunk. And I was often called a painfully shy child when I was a kid. And even in those days, I knew it was an apt label. Some shyness is painful, and mine certainly was. And one of the prime byproducts of my shyness was I would not talk to adults, could not talk to adults. So I gave the bus driver my customary shrugged shoulders / nonverbal, which was shy kid speak for, I don't know. And I used that one a lot. Though I truly didn't know we were indeed moving. My parents had split up. We were selling our house. My mom and siblings and I moved in to a low rent apartment complex with a mud pit for a yard and an illegal swing set they called a playground. And while I was exposed to a lot of marital drama that I shouldn't have been, this was all enough of a surprise for my shrugged shoulders to have been earnest. So thus began the swift and steep descent from lower middle class into poverty for us. We've also often heard children raised in poverty say they didn't really realize they were poor. I realized we were poor. it wasn't so much that I minded it or griped about it, but I was just every day very aware of the differences between my family and other families when it came to money. Things like I was unable to join my classmates on a field trip once, a big one that we talked about all year, because my mom, even though I truly believe she always did her best, she was not able to scrape up the $13 required. That was kind of a common occurrence. That's an example of something very common in my childhood. We never went hungry or shoeless. We always had a place to live. But mom would trick us by putting powdered milk into regular milk cartons, there's like a constant battle over the price of milk in our household. And she'd keep a steak hidden in the back of the freezer for nights when none of the kids were at home. I'll never forget the first time I found that steak. It was like such a betrayal. Mom, what the fuck? I couldn't even say pho back then, but I really did feel like a weird betrayal. Like, who are you? Where's your maternal nature? But I mean, the lady wanted the occasional steak, and I'll never forget that. My little brother and I only went for doctor's visits when it was mandated by law, and we only went to the dentist once during our childhood. That dentist was so heinous. He chewed up the side of my tongue by hitting it with the drill, and then chastised me for biting him, which I considered a reasonably equitable trade, even though it was involuntary. But fuck you, bad doctor. And I don't know what he did to him, but he made my poor little brother faint. So that was our one experience at the dentist. To earn money, I started babysitting like a mofo beginning at age 11. I once babysat a kid older than I was.
Whoa.
Pro tip, don't hire an 11-year-old babysitter. I mean, I can't stress this enough. It's a bad idea. I once refused to turn over the sleeping children in my charge to the people who showed up that evening claiming to be their parents because I didn't recognize them. I thought they were trying to kidnap the kids. And my little heart was going ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. I thought I was going to have to call the cops and report an attempted kidnapping.
They wouldn't have turned up though, so don't worry.
Foiled by my keen eye as an 11-year-old. I was going to be in the newspaper and everything. It was them. It was the parents. I just didn't recognize them. That's how busy a babysitter I was. I was in some ways so sheltered that my mom insisted I phone her to come over anytime a boy baby needed a diaper change. She was so concerned about me seeing even the bareliest of penises. That's so my mom. But little did my mom know that throughout my entire babysitting career, aged 11 to 16, I knew where all the porn stashes of all the parents in my neighborhood were hidden. And I kept track of who left the highest number of drags on the cigarettes I'd find in their ashtrays. Because, I mean, I was trying to make money, but also I would, give preference to whoever had the best porn and the longest cigarette butts. I mean, I'm human, we need perks. Even babysitters need perks. Whenever there was a bump here comes the kind of sad part. Whenever there was a bump or ruffle in the budget, mom would ask my dad to step up. And when I needed a dress for the junior prom, she asked him not only to pay for it, but also to take me shopping for it. So off I went to frock shop with a man I barely knew. And I was so eager to get it over with that I literally grabbed the first dress I saw and proclaimed it the one. And I guess I was 15 at the time. My dad, to his credit, he could tell my discomfort was going to put me in a dress I didn't really like for my big night. So he tried everything. He said, you know, let's keep looking some more. Why don't we go to several stores before we make a decision? Nope. I wanted to get that dress and get the fuck out of there. Yeah. He did everything right that day, but it just wasn't enough to make that situation not be fucked up. When senior prom came, I just borrowed a dress from my sister. When I was 17 and preparing to move out, I had skipped a grade in high school to graduate a year early for just this reason. I asked Mom if I could start going to the dentist. I'm not sure how many other kids ask their mother if they can start going to the dentist, but it was certainly new for me. But I knew I'd be unable to afford it once I was on my own. I was moving from one poor household to establish another poor household, even poorer household of my own, living on minimum wage that I earned at the mall where I had been working since the minute I was old enough to get a work permit. It was a proverbial frying pan fire thing. The new dentist, a marked improvement over the dude who tried to kill us through oral hygiene. He understood my plight, or, you know, he sympathized, I guess, or he knew at least what it was. And he worked me in as often as possible until I left home a few months later, still just 17, to move into my first tiny apartment, $90 a month. Oh. Yes, this was 1977, because I'm 100 years old, remember? In the 100 or so years since then, I've chosen to work mostly in the arts and nonprofit fields, which have kept me pretty poor, except for a few years here and there of working 9-to-5 jobs where I would eat better, but just hate every minute of life. I learned my limitations and made my choices. It's not unusual for me to have the same $3 in my wallet for weeks. And because everything is relative, especially money, I think I am indeed talking about below the official federal poverty level, usually occupying that cushier spot just beneath the qualifying line, or sometimes just above it. But that's where I'm at home. I'm a master of frugality. I'm such a penny pincher. I've been accused of making Lincoln scream. It's true. I could have lived with more ease and comfort and security, but I think I've mastered almost to a comedic level the art of living on very little. And I'm comfortable in that place. And in some ways I've benefited from it. My inability to financially support worthy organizations has fueled my volunteerism through my adulthood. And that's believing that if I couldn't donate money, I would donate time. That policy has led to all manner of good things in my life. My life would be very different if I hadn't been volunteering throughout my adulthood. My mom's is the aforementioned death. I know I promised you a happy story, and I swear this has a full out Hollywood happily ever after, I promise. She died last year. She was 91 and ready to go. Her will was nullified because it was insufficiently witnessed. So in accordance with the law, the proceeds from the sale of her house were divided between my 3 siblings and I, rather than the dozen or so heirs that she had chosen and put in her will. which included stepchildren, grandchildren, step-grandchildren. My 25% wasn't swimming pools, movie stars money, but it was enough that they called the bank manager out to intervene when I tried to deposit the check into my checking account. He was all, let's talk about what you can do with this. And I told him, relax, I'm giving it all away as soon as the check clears anyway. That made him a lot more tense. I elected to pay the rightful heirs out of my quarter. A quarter of what they would have gotten. Admittedly, my hands shook when I wrote those checks, mostly to people I didn't know or hadn't seen since I was a kid. But their responses were unexpected, unrequired, and beautiful. So I kept going. A few friends who knew what I was doing were curious. They know me as a struggling creative type and always looking for the next commission. One who often turns down the pricier invitations. It's a significant part of my identity. But I started giving the money away to individuals and orgs I thought needed it, people I thought deserved it, and lots of groups I'd rarely had dough enough to support previously. Southern Poverty Law Center, Legal Aid Society, Black Lives Matter New York, several abortion rights groups, a handful of LGBTQ organizations. I'm laughing because I'm picturing my mom listening to this list. A group which serves those experiencing homelessness, a housing rights group, World Central Kitchen multiple times. I love them. That Stacey Abrams anti-voter fuckery group. I love her. A few struggling performance and visual arts groups, some activists, a number of bail funds, cop watch groups, several political campaigns, including a handful of donations to Elizabeth Warren. Not enough. Protest groups and subversive collectives, some so small and clunky, I had a hard time finding out how to make donations to them. I gave money to individuals in need. I gave money to people I don't like. I gave money to people who never acknowledged or thanked me. And it didn't make any difference. It was just as satisfying to me. It all felt good. I was making it rain all over the world, or I guess making it drizzle in places all over the world. Maybe a light mist.
There was a good fog.
A good fog that burned off earlier, but
a marine layer, perhaps.
A marine layer. Thank you for knowing what a marine layer is.
I'm in the Pacific Northwest, motherfucker.
Oh, okay. There have been times when I've thought, girl, what are you doing? You need a buy-load of dental work. You're going to have to go to Belgium someday where it's cheap. But you know, it's still, it feels good to do it. I did spend a little on myself. I bought a piece of art that's been speaking to me for over a year. I'm maybe getting the boots I've coveted for 2 lifetimes, a new tattoo. Thanks, Mom. A store-bought haircut. If and when either of those last 2 things are ever safe again, I'll be going out for that. But it's immeasurably satisfying for a poor person, a legit card-carrying poor person, to be able to respond to the needs of others, financially respond, without hesitation, just as they would do for me, sometimes have done for me. So when she was diagnosed with metastasized cancer, I asked Mom if she was afraid of dying, and she said no. But I wish she'd have had the option to have had a more adventurous life, if that's what she wanted. I often wish I could posthumously take her with me to all the places I visit. Now I've kind of found a way to do that. I've given her money to folks all over the world to make that world a better place.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, just to buy new shoes for somebody's kids and make the life of a single mother less filled with the tribulations hers was. I can't say this dismantling is permanent. It's definitely a finite thing. I'm already low on resources, and at some point soon I'll be slam busted again. But this is a spot I'm comfortably familiar with. I find being poor neither desirable nor tragic. It just is. And the overwhelming people experiencing poverty it's out of their hands. There's nothing they can do about it. Even in poverty, white privilege plays a role. Neither money nor the lack thereof are any great equalizers, as people say. But for those with financial options, I highly recommend trying it out sometime. I think you'll hate it, which is a good thing, but there's nothing more enlightening than taking a stroll into someone else's shoes. And by way of an epilogue, during my mom's illness, there was a time when she didn't want to eat or drink. Others would say she refused. She would say she just forgot to eat. So one day on the phone, I asked her what would help her remember to eat and drink every day. She said, "Why don't you give me a call every day to remind me?" Because parents are sneaky. So I thought that was, I knew what she was doing, but I thought that was great. I got the impression that she had a tight TV viewing schedule, and the last thing I wanted was to call her and have my feelings hurt when she wanted to watch Dr. Phil instead. So I asked her what time was the best time to call her during her day, and she said, "How about this time?" So I set my phone reminder for 5:11 p.m. and I got a mom alarm. Every day at 5:11 I would call. And when she died, I was weirdly unable to delete the reminder. So it continued on my phone for months. Every day, 5:11, my mom alarm would go off. I later bought a new phone. Thanks, Mom. And everything transferred over to the new phone except for my reminders. I knew I would hear Christine gasp.
I was expecting like a clean slate, but no, everything but Mom?
Everything but the reminders, the mom alarm that I couldn't erase. I couldn't just seem to break free of it.
Yeah.
The universe.
Steve fucking Jobs, man. Stepping in, being like, all right, now's the time.
It was the universe. The universe did it, except for the fact that there's no sentient, benevolent universe. The universe.
Steve Jobs.
I mean, no, come on. It's a malfunctioning cloud glitch thingy. So, but I had this alarm for so long. I find that often, not every day, but very often, I find myself looking at the clock right at 5:11. So I have this sort of internal thing now happening. But now, instead of that being a jolt, a reminder to call my mom, it's my daily reminder to do something to help someone in need. And I'm not sure she'd agree with the groups I've chosen to support. I know she wouldn't. She would, oh my God, she would hate the fuck out of abortion rights, getting her money. But when I big picture it, I like to think what I've done would be cool with her. And though it's the most cornball thing to say, but I'd be hard pressed to avoid saying it right now. I may be poor in money, but I am one wealthy ass bitch in friends and love and peace.
Yeah.
And Maya Angelou once said, among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver. And I so believe that. So one could even say that this is all selfish on my part, and I'm okay with that. So that's my story about a poor person suddenly becoming not poor and doing everything in her power to become poor again. I stand and curtsy, but I'm not wearing pants. So I won't, but I do own pants, so don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Substantia. Oh, yes.
That's it. I'm so uncomfortable sharing like personal shit like that, but
thank you for doing so.
When I heard Miguel talk about putting your money where your mouth is and not calling yourself an ally, I thought that's the universe telling me I chose the right subject to talk about tonight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
so great.
The universe. Under Barack Obama saying, do it, Substantia. Very good idea.
It's like, what do you do in capitalism? Like, how do we even? And the choices are like, you either like throw the resources at the thing at the same time as doing the work, right? Like you're throwing all the capitalist structure resources at the things, at the organizations and the people who need those resources at the same time as you do your own personal amazing like deconstructive work. Or you just like abdicate any responsibility to interact with the world. And it's really important to recognize like where we are and that we have a responsibility to what is, even though we're fighting to make what is change dramatically. Like there's no way to just not be in this situation. We have to work with it and move through it. And that's just a beautiful story of like, here's a bunch of stuff. And this is important. This is important. And thanks, Mom.
In some cases, it's it's a drop in the bucket, but in some cases, it's a really big deal. I think just like you want to diversify in investments, I think you should diversify in your. I used to call it your giving portfolio when I was in. Community radio trying to raise money. That makes people think I'm supposed to have a giving portfolio. Oh my God, I feel so inadequate. Yes, take my money. It was horrible, but
that's terrible.
I know.
Wow. Thank you so much, Substantia.
Thank you, Stacy, for letting me do this again. I had so much fun last time, way too much fun last time. And much of it began at the end when we all walked down to Freddie's bar.
Yes, when we got to go to Freddie's
and drank beneath the sexy naked frog.
Yes.
So for those folks who are new to how to build a fire and are new to it on the online Zoom platform, when we are located in South Brooklyn at the beautiful open source gallery, we all toddle down about a block and a half away to this little bar where there is an intimidatingly beautiful frog.
Sexy frog.
In an aquarium.
Some say creepy as fuck. I'm just going to say that.
I'm going to say right now it looks like me naked, so it's intimidatingly beautiful. Just saying. Anyway.
And tater tots.
And so many tater tots. So we all have these amazing lives that we've come together in this beautiful little period of time to share. And I wanted let's have some noise. Like, yes. You came here.
Thank you to all of our You guys were so wonderful tonight. Thank you so much. So great.
To our storytellers, beautiful Tutu, Miguel, Olivera, and Substantia. Oh, yes.
Hey guys.
Terrence, are you trying to talk?
I have a quick question.
Is it important? Is it interesting? Do we need
be
to
a
listen
joke.
to you?
No, we don't.
Come on, Terrence, what's your question?
Does it have to do with the
Why
future?
do we all look like quarantine people except for Christine looks like she has like the most glamorous person on the planet. Jesus.
Right?
Like,
We can't hear you unless you lean right up into
oh
the camera.
God, look at this. And then I look at Christine, I'm like, fucking shit.
Guys, what is happening right now? I didn't understand a single thing you said. Like, I have no idea what.
Yeah.
I feel like mostly it was praise for me, so I was listening really hard.
It was ambient anger.
Ambient fury and frustration.
And
All
how
right,
glamorous
so Terrence,
you are.
I'm pretty glamorous. I avoided
are.
putting my head in
Yes,
the pool
you
for this
are.
hair.
Very good.
Thank you all for coming to not only witness my glamour, but to also like share some space and to be beautiful people whose glamour I get to witness, which is the best part of this, is being in a space with such phenomenal human beings.
And
Like-
getting to hear your incredible stories and getting to see the rest of this wonderful audience who's come to hear the stories.
Yeah.
And
The
next
chat, by the
month-
way, has been amazing. Love it.
Yes.
Mwah.
Next month, we don't know if we'll be in person or on Zoom. And yeah, you'll just have to
Probably
stay
Zoom.
tuned. Yeah, probably Zoom. But I was trying to pretend to optimism. So
I'm done with that.
Yeah, we need a vaccine before there's more optimism in my heart.
that's true.
We need a vaccine and also a vaccine for systemic racism. Let's
Yeah.
Yes.
Bada boom.
have we been working on that? I don't know. Like, or have we just stopped testing for that as well?
I think Mike Pence is in charge of that, so all is well. We can relax.
I
It's
think
coming
it's
anytime.
Jared Kushner who's going to solve that problem.
Oh, yes, I'm
fuck
sorry.
me.
You're right.
We'll solve it with art and revolution.
That's
Yeah,
right.
he's doing his
Yes.
35 books.
That's right.
I'm just ready to piss on some monuments. Like, you point to it, I will defecate that shit because I have no more words. So I'm just like a human cannon. Use me at your will.
Stacey and Christina,
What were you saying, Terrence?
Say again,
I
Terrence?
wasn't listening.
did you guys announce what you're doing next month?
No,
We
we are leaving it as a surprise for ourselves as well as the audience. Because Christina and I need to get together and make it make sense first.
Okay, got it. Understood.
Partly because we don't know if it's going to be on Zoom or if it's going to be in a physical space or if it's going to be somewhere in the beautiful between zone of both. But either way, we will be hosting How to Build a Fire.
Next month.
Yep, it will be the last Friday of the
in
month.
July.
Which,
And it would be good if we could say what day that actually was. It will be on July 31st.
Wow.
Literally the last day of July.
That's not hard to remember at all. It's the last day of the month. Turn up, give us some love, and we'll give it right back to you. So thank you for coming. And we'll see
Thank
you then.
you.
Thank
for
you,
hosting.
everyone, for coming. Grace, I didn't say hi to you before. I thought it might have been you, but I wasn't sure. So hi, Grace. And I'm really happy that my mom and my sister were here, and I'm happy that all of you were here too.
Yay!
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
If you all want to hang out and chat, that's also fine. But if you all want to like go sleep off your hangover, that's also
the
good.
recording now, so all manner of crazy ass things can be said at this point.
You'll have to make friends with each other if you